And welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. I'm Josh Hennig, your host. Appreciate you joining me again this week. Our one-on-one conversation this week will be with Emory Hunt. He covers college football and the NFL. He's also at the NFL Combine. We're going to dig into some deeper thoughts on talent evaluation and the Combine. We'll get to our six-pack first right here on the Mutant Blitz podcast. So topic number one I want to get to is Brian Windhorst's story that came out in the last couple of days talking about the NBA's plans of getting rid of the one and done. Now, I think most people agree that the one and done was purposely put in place by the previous commissioner, David Stern, as a way to help the college basketball game not lose their stars and not lose out on players going there. But it was also done because David Stern realized that the level of talent coming out of high school just wasn't meeting the level of expectation. And with Carmelo Anthony going to college for 1 year and then coming out himself, I think that they looked at that and said, well, that's the standard. That's going to be what's going to happen. The Carmelo Anthonys of the world will go to college for 1 year, then come out. Realistically, the one and done hasn't fixed the problems with the NBA talent pool. Overall, the NBA talent pool is still diluted. It still lacks a lot of great talent depth to it. So this idea the NBA is coming along with, where they would develop relationships with high schoolers, provide them skills, help them on and off the court, an alternate path to the NBA aside from playing in college, is a twofold effort. One way is to keep these kids from going overseas. We've seen, whether it's Ferguson of the Oklahoma City Thunder, years ago Brandon Jennings went to China. We're seeing guys go to Europe, like Jonah Bolden, who was drafted by the Sixers, who was at UCLA, and then went to Europe to make money. So this is Adam Silver's way to come up with a path to pretty much bypass college basketball. And I think this is something that is a little bit long overdue, but it's also something that doesn't address the problem. The problem with the one and done isn't the money scandals that are going on. The issue with college basketball and the NBA is much bigger than that. And it's this: the level of talent coming into the draft each year is nowhere near what it was 15, 20, 30 years ago. The level of talent coming out of the draft now is at such a lesser level of basketball talent. You may have better athletes today. You may have more freakish players, but you don't have better talent. So many years in the draft each year. There are so many guys you don't pay attention. It's not like the level of player is better by going to college for a year. Just like the level of player wasn't better when they came right out of high school. The high school, the NBA was never the issue. These athletes are being drafted based on potential and not on actual playing ability. That's the major difference. I think we look so much about, well, should they get paid? Should they not get paid? And all this stuff. To me, baseball has it right. This idea that, listen, you can either come from high school and go pro and be in our minor leagues until you're ready, or you can go to college for 3 years and then come out. I think if the NBA did something like that to say, listen, you either come to the G League now or you go to college, because when you have guys going to college for a year, you're not really seeing them develop on or off the court. Part of the college experience that makes it valuable for the professional athlete has to do with the fact that you're having to learn what life is like responsibility-wise as an adult. You're learning you have to go to class, you have to keep up with your grades, you have to keep up with your life outside of basketball. You're learning to manage all these things. And if you went to be straight professional, you still learn how to manage all those things. But instead of learning it in the NBA, you learn at the G League level. And I think that's where we can make this work. I like the fact the NBA is attempting to make something better in all this. But let's remember, the problem with the NBA's talent pool isn't this. I don't think this is going to fix the problem when it comes to the issues in college basketball. Because the issue in college basketball, at the end of the day, is there is a farce of amateurism going on at the collegiate athletic level. And until the NCAA lets these athletes make money on their own time, whether it's, as Jim Boeheim says, making commercials, or it's been suggested by some people in the media that just let the players get paid, who cares, by agents, it would still be better than what we have now. And I think the NBA working toward getting rid of the one and done, I think is a good idea. But until they stop drafting for potential instead of actual ability, I think we're still going to have a problem with the talent coming in the NBA, and you'll continue to have numerous busts in the draft. Just look at the Sixers. They went through the process. They came out the other end with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Markelle Fultz. Jahlil Okafor, Nerlens Noel, and Michael Carter-Williams still have not met expectations at all. Nerlens Noel is expected to be the next Ben Wallace. Okafor is expected to be the next, people even compared him to Tim Duncan, which I thought was ridiculous. And Michael Carter-Williams was expected to be the next Jason Kidd. Well, obviously those guys didn't meet expectations. They can still be nice, solid NBA players and hang around for a while, but that means 3 out of the 6 Sixers lottery picks that they came out of the process with were failures. That's a 50% success rate. The problem with the NBA is not going to be totally fixed when it comes to the pool of talent just by getting rid of the one and done, but it is going to help the athletes themselves. And at least that in and of itself is a step in the right direction. So over this past weekend, I don't know if this was purposely released or accidentally released, but we got a full list of all the Disney movies that are planned production moving forward. Disney is the owner of Marvel Studios. There is currently a bunch of untitled Marvel movies that are all dated for what you would consider Phase 4. Right now we're in Phase 3. And after the 4th Avengers movie, that's when Phase 4 is supposed to start. When you go through this list, and again, we don't know if this was purposely released or not, but when you think about it, so the 4th Avengers movie is 2019, and then the Spider-Man movie. And then Guardians of the Galaxy is targeted for 2020. Now, if you go by this list that was released online, we see that 2020 movie is dated for, it looks like, July 31st, 2020. The next Marvel movie is dated for 2021 of May. 3 movies dated for 2021. So we expect that to be the next major hard launch within the Phase 4. If you look at how far out some of these dates go, they even go out with Marvel. The latest date is July of 2022. So we're talking about, it's 2018 now. We're talking about 4 years, 5 years down the road in production planning. To some people, this may seem like a bit of a shocker, because why are they not having them named? Well, there's a couple reasons why they don't have them named right now. One of them has to do with the fact that Marvel may be keeping those future dates open for the acquisition of Fox Studios and the rights returning to Marvel for Fantastic Four and X-Men properties. If you're going to bring those characters into the Marvel Universe, that's a whole nother set of stories and scenarios and planning that goes into this. Marvel is going to have to spend time thinking about what they want to do with Fantastic Four. And the more future openings they have non-committed to other movie properties, the better. Remember, we may not keep Peter Parker Spider-Man forever. You may go to Miles Morales at some point just to change things up. If you bring in X-Men and Fantastic Four, it may not be your traditional origin stories. It may be an explanation for why the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are showing up now in the MCU instead of years ago. They'll find a way to blend this in, and having as many movies ahead of time is part of that. The other side of the reason having these movie plans all the way through 2022 is because actors like Benedict Cumberbatch and Chadwick Bosworth, they have other commitments outside the MCU. They do other movies. This isn't like when you brought in Chris Hemsworth and you made a star out of him. You're getting bigger and bigger names committed to the Marvel Universe. And because of that, they're not going to be as flexible for what you want them to do. So you got to have these movies planned out way ahead of time in order to work around that. Also, don't overlook the fact that with Marvel, they're going to have a Black Panther 2. They're probably going to have a Doctor Strange 2. They're going to have a longer storyline going on with Ant-Man and the Wasp. We have no confirmation yet on what would, in the comic book world, be considered the new Avengers, or the Avengers post Captain America and Thor and Iron Man, because we know that Chris Evans has said that he doesn't want to be Captain America forever. He really has a passion for directing and making his own movies. We know that Robert Downey Jr. is getting older and he can't be Iron Man in the current form that he's in forever. We know that Chris Hemsworth wants to move on from being Thor at some point. So all these characters want to not be in there forever. And the Infinity War saga allows you to give them a good send-off, whether it's by killing the characters off permanently or creating an alternate reality if somebody taps into the reality stone and goes nuts. We don't know exactly what's going to happen yet with Thanos. You can do a lot of different ways with this, and maybe that's how you introduce the Fantastic Four and the X-Men into the MCU. So keep in mind, all of these dates from 2020 through 2022 are all open because either you're trying to fit in the X-Men Fantastic Four, or they're open because you're trying to stay flexible around the schedule of people like Benedict Cumberbatch and Chadwick Bosworth. So CBS Sports came out with an extensive report Tuesday night about the University of Memphis looking at the potential of firing Tubby Smith and hiring alumni Penny Hardaway to be their next head basketball coach. The college world generating prospects for the NBA it's been going on like this for decades upon decades on end. Memphis is stuck between a rock and a hard place because this is more than just, getting players to come to your university now. This is a bigger issue. You see, under Tubby Smith, the program has not been anywhere near expectations. Yes, buying him out would be very expensive. According to reports, it would cost $9.75 million to buy out Tubby Smith. But 4 years ago, under Josh Pazner at Memphis, they averaged 16,000 in attendance at the FedEx Forum. Right now, under Smith, that number has dropped to 6,000. It's the lowest in 50 years. And now, because the attendance is so low, the Memphis Grizzlies will not pay the university money for using their arena. Because if they brought in a certain number of attendants, the Grizzlies could pay them up to $800,000 for using the NBA franchise's venue. Now they're just going to cut even, is Memphis. That's something that Penny Hardaway can change. Also is the fact that he's connected to so many 2019 prospects. You got to remember that Memphis, one of the things that made Memphis under Calipari that Josh Pazner tried to maintain after Calipari left was bringing in a certain caliber of star talent to the university. That's one of the reasons why you have some people coming out and watching the games. So you look at a guy like Hardaway, he's connected to kids like James Wiseman, DJ Jeffries, and Chandler Lawson. Those are three guys who are in the top 40 of the 2019 recruiting class. And because of Penny's connections on the AAU circuit and at East High in Memphis, he's a prime candidate to fill in. And he's got a legend backing him up. Larry Brown could come with Penny and be his assistant coach. So you don't just have the name of Penny Hardaway coming to Memphis. You don't just have his connections to this talent pool of kids who will follow him to the school potentially. You also have a legend in Larry Brown, and you also have a coach in Tubby Smith who can't get out of his own way. You may or may not have heard, but Tubby Smith also said after 6 of his players transferred out of the school, he inferred the players should not be allowed to transfer easily because it enables an attitude of quitting. So basically, Tubby is blaming the transfers on his inability to coach these kids. It's a horrible example. Tubby has fallen very far from where he was at Kentucky and Minnesota and these other schools, where he did a lot of good at those schools. Obviously, the Memphis job was not a fit for him. Tubby Smith has seen better days. And I think that it's a good idea for Memphis to move on, especially if the NBA does eventually get rid of the one and done. College are going to have to make sure that they have coaches who are going to do more to generate not just players coming to the school, but generating interest from outsiders, not just coaches who are has-beens like Tubby Smith. Not saying that Tubby can't coach anymore, but I think that he's past his prime when it comes to recruiting, and definitely I believe that. Or also a coach, and you look at some of these schools that just can't generate the energy and the interest from the boosters. You look at a guy like Avery Johnson when he went to Alabama, it changed how people viewed Alabama basketball altogether. You look at a guy like Bruce Pearl that went to Auburn, changed things around there. You have to have a coach that's going to change the attitude of the program. Bobby Hurley at Arizona State has been huge for that program so far. On the flip side, you look at schools like USC or an Oklahoma or a school like Illinois, whose current coaches do not have the same pedigree or gravitas as predecessors did. They're not generating the same energy or passion for the school, and as a result, the school is not getting as great recruits, is not getting as great talent or interest or fans. And the only reason why some of these players go there is because you look at a guy like Trae Young, he's a local kid. Not because the head coach of Oklahoma is a great recruiter. There's a huge difference, and I think Penny Hardaway can change the fortunes of Memphis altogether. Our fourth topic here in the six-pack has to do with Netflix. Those of you who have Netflix know that Marvel has put a lot of their TV shows onto the Netflix platform, including Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, who's known as Danny Rand, and also Jessica Jones. And of course, they had the crossover with the Defenders, and recently they came out with the Punisher show. Great shows, and Netflix is offering you a superhero version of what HBO and Showtime do with their big productions. Maybe, you've watched things like Game of Thrones, or you watched a show like Power, or you watched a show like Ray Donovan. Netflix is doing the same thing but with superheroes. While doing promotion ahead of the debut of the second season of Jessica Jones on Netflix, star actress Kristen Ritter told the media she does not expect another reunion of the Defenders show. The Defenders, which was the crossover show for all the Netflix shows. So you had Luke Cage, you had Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and all of their friends and associates were all in one miniseries. And it was a pretty fun show. It was pretty explosive. It also brought a nice conclusion to the first season for all their shows because it gave a nice connection for everybody. So now they move forward after that. The actress who plays Jessica Jones, Kristen Ritter, said that while she enjoyed the experience of working with all the other actors and actresses, she does not expect a second season of Defenders. The reason this is significant is because remember that Disney is eventually going to launch their own multimedia platform. You're going to see eventually in the future ESPN, which is owned by Disney, and other Disney properties move away from what they're doing now. So like, for example, if you have this ESPN app, you download it and you can watch anything on the ESPN channels if you already have a current cable subscription. In the future, if you have the ESPN app, you don't have to have cable to watch things on the ESPN app. You just have to have a subscription to ESPN. And it looks like that subscription is going to be an actual better setup than needing the cable providers. Well, Disney is going to do a similar thing, and they're going to want to put a lot of their properties on there. Well, what's one of their properties? One of their properties is these Netflix characters. And unless Disney and Netflix can come to some sort of agreement, you may see the future of these street-level superheroes like Jessica Jones and the Defenders and the Punisher moved on to the Disney platform. And what's going to happen is that Disney is becoming more and more emboldened by the success of Marvel Studios and by the success of Pixar, that they feel like they don't need somebody else to be their distributor, that they can distribute themselves. It's going to be a very interesting concept to see how it works, but I think it can. And I think that's part of the reasons why the Defenders is not being planned right now, because also Disney is trying to finish the process of acquiring Fox Studios. And if they acquire all the X-Men and all the Fantastic Four properties, there's a lot of other ways they can interchange with their Netflix characters. And I'm sure Netflix and Disney/Marvel can come to some sort of agreement to keep them there. But I think that has something to do with the Defenders not being planned right now. By the way, if you haven't watched the Marvel shows on Netflix, you are really missing out. The writing and the acting in these shows has been really intense and deep. The depth and the ability of these actors to really bring these characters to life, characters that in some ways are C and D level characters, and make them interesting and captivating with their story writing, I think is great. You can watch them in order, but I would say my two favorite seasons have been Daredevil and Luke Cage. I think Luke Cage, that season 1 was exceptional. What they've done with Daredevil has really made what that movie was years ago, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Gardner, look like child's play. This version of Daredevil is the Daredevil from the comics. This is what Frank Miller and the different writers from Daredevil over the years really meant for him to be and act and look like. And I think it's a great job that they've done with that character. Jessica Jones is interesting. It allows some variety and depth to the Marvel Universe by having her there, but it's not essential. Some people were down on Iron Fist. I think the people who were down on Iron Fist didn't fully understand what they were trying to do with Iron Fist. I think that if they go to Iron Fist Season 2, it'll be better than Season 1. But Season 1 was necessary to kind of lay some groundwork. The Punisher show is great. It's intense. It's gritty. And it gives you, again, a different side, a different edge of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I highly recommend the Netflix shows. If you're one of those people who likes to watch the Ray Donovans and the Game of Thrones and shows like Power and all these things on the premium channels, then you will be just as appreciative of what Netflix and Marvel has done with their shows. On Wednesday, the Seattle Seahawks traded 3-time Pro Bowler Michael Bennett in the 7th-round pick to the Eagles for wide receiver Marcus Johnson and a 5th-round pick. There is some speculation the 5th-round pick is the same 5th-round pick the Eagles got from Seattle in the Matt Tobin trade before the season. You basically could be giving Seattle their pick back, which is fine. So no harm, no foul. What is interesting to me is the fact that you look overall at what the Eagles are doing. They're telling you they're not sitting on their hands. And they're going to do it in a way that's going to make sure they have salary cap room. Michael Bennett makes $1.5 to $2 million less on a salary cap hit than Vinny Curry does. Vinny Curry is right now the highest paid defensive end. He's higher paid than Brandon Graham, Chris Long, Derek Barnett. And yet he was less productive than all three of those guys. The Eagles understand the value of Brandon Graham. Vinny Curry is the outside looking in. And whether they trade him or cut him, it's going to be costly no matter what. I think at least if they renegotiate the deal, it'll be easier for them to trade him because it'll be easier for a team to rationalize picking him up. And if I'm the Eagles, if I want to call a team and say, hey, listen, we're going to rework Vinny's deal. I'm going to offer you Vinny and one of my 2 4th-round picks, and you give me a 3rd-round pick, I think most teams would say yes to that deal. And that's really what Howie Roseman's doing. By getting the 7th-round pick, he's also rebuilding the cupboard of draft picks he lost in other trades. The Eagles don't have a 2nd or 3rd round pick this year. So that means that they're trying to find a way to get those picks. Also getting Michael Bennett, aside from being a cost-saving move, is also allows the Eagles to continue to be diversified in their defense. Remember, Michael Bennett can play on the inside and outside of the line. And he is a guy who is a monster both on the inside and the outside on defense. So you can run a lot of formations. Listen, your 3rd down blitz package could be Michael Bennett and Fletcher Cox next to each other on the inside and Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett on the outside. That's freak show. That's a bunch of monsters coming at the quarterback. Who's stopping that? There's very few teams that have a chance to stop that. And I think Michael Bennett, this is good for him as well because it seemed like his time had run out in Seattle. It seemed like he had overstayed his welcome and he had just been there too long. I think for Michael Bennett, this is a great opportunity for him to get a fresh start, go to a locker room that can handle his stuff, shall we say, and deal with him being him. Michael Bennett is a very unique character. He's a different kind of cat, and I think putting him in an environment with the Eagles, with their strong locker room, and the fact that coming off the Super Bowl allows Michael Bennett to not get out of hand. When in terms of what he says publicly, what he does on and off the field, I think that environment can kind of reel him in a little bit. And guess what? If it doesn't, the Eagles can get out of the contract. After the 2018 season, the Eagles can move on from him. They do not have to keep him under contract. They can, step away and not, cost them a ton of money. It would only cost them about $1.725 million, or if they renegotiate his deal when he comes here, it could be even less to cut him after this season. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. Meanwhile, Seattle can start rebuilding their team, save some money, and Marcus Johnson is a nice backup plan if Paul Richardson leaves the team in free agency, because Marcus Johnson has got good hands and he can run pretty fast and he's a good route runner. Those are things Seattle needs in the wide receiver core in case Paul Richardson leaves in free agency. The final topic in my six-pack, and I usually do another comic topic here, but I wanted to touch on Shaq Griffin. Shaq Griffin is a young man from the University of Central Florida. He only has one hand. He has a twin brother in the NFL. Not having a hand does hurt Shaq Griffin in terms of doing a lot of things in life, not just playing football. It's not something that prevents him from living his life, but he just has to live his life differently than other people. But he has shown that him being different does not prohibit him from being excellent at the game of football. He was a defensive weapon at the University of Central Florida. He was a wrecking crew in the game versus Auburn in that bowl game on New Year's Day. You saw multiple times again and again how good Shaq Griffin was and how he made that defense run. You saw at the combine, he ran a 4.38, one of the fastest linebackers in combine history. He bench pressed with a prosthetic hand, 225, 20 times on the bench press. You see the smile on his face. You see the passion, the drive he has for the game of football. If I'm an NFL team, I want him. I don't know what position he plays. To me, I think he's a guy who would be best suited for a 4-3 defense, because I think that you draft him with the idea that he's going to be a safety / linebacker, a guy who is a strong safety who can blitz the quarterback, can play in coverage, can tackle in the box, can do a lot of different things. I think he would have problems in a 3-4 defense just because, as of this moment in time, he doesn't have the power moves to get after a quarterback right now. But his speed and agility and explosiveness makes up for what he doesn't have in natural strength. Like a guy like a James Harrison, he's not built like a James Harrison or a Terrell Suggs, guys who excel in that 3-4 defense outside linebacker. But if you put him in a defense where he can kind of roam the field, be a sideline-to-sideline attacker, I see him very much being able to do in some ways what players, in the back of the day, like a Brian Dawkins did, what a guy currently like a Mark Barron did this past season for the Rams, what a player like Cam Chancellor was able to do in Seattle. These are all guys I think would fit this mold, this idea of what Shaq Griffin could be at the NFL level. I'm rooting for this kid because I think he's got the passion and the drive and the ability to not just be a good NFL player, to be a great NFL player. Because the worst case scenario, he's going to be a Pro Bowler or special teams. He's got that ability to be that gunner on a kickoff or a punt, to get downfield and not just be fast enough to get to said returner, but to tackle them and take them down. He is a special athlete and a special player, and I think any team that overlooks him because of him missing a hand or any other variable does not measure the value of greatness. The value of greatness isn't your abilities. The value of greatness is what you do with your given ability. Speaking of the NFL draft, coming up next, my one-on-one conversation with Emory Hunt of the Pro Football Writers Association. He covers the college and the NFL game. We're going to get into more about the NFL draft and the NFL Combine next, here on the Mutant Blitz podcast. And welcome to my one-on-one conversation. Today we're going to dive into the NFL Combine and the draft and kind of talk about the process of evaluating prospects and some of the correct and incorrect stereotypes when it comes to the draft process. I have with me now Emory Hunt. You can follow him on Twitter at the Football Gameplan, but also he played college football as a running back, and he's also a member of the Pro Football Writers of America. Emory, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate all the work that you do because you give your own spice to the coverage of the game of football, and I really appreciate that because as a former athlete myself, you're a former athlete. It's a different perspective than a lot of, not a lot of, but a good amount of the media. That's where I want to start with. How do you feel like, as a guy who played at the collegiate level, as a running back, how does your evaluation of the game differ from those who didn't play the game at the level that you did?
Well, for me, it's just about looking at the events or whatever I'm watching for what it is, whether it's the East-West Shrine Game, Senior Bowl. You look at that as, okay, that's essentially practice, and you know how to kind of look at practice from an evaluation standpoint. From the combine, you're just looking at it from a football drill standpoint. And so I think a lot of people that may not have had the experience look at everything as if they're looking at a real game, and that's not the case. You have to look at it and, realize that guys are going to make mistakes. Guys are going to, not go full speed because it's practice, and you have to judge and evaluate accordingly.
Specifically the running back position, what is usually a couple things that you look for? Because for someone like me, and I never played a running back, I played safety, but for me, when I look at a running back, it's a perspective of, I like to see the explosion out of the cut. I like to see a guy hit the hole, and I like to see just his overall understanding of the offense. So how do you look at a running back typically at the high school and college level?
Well, you just want to see you want to see how guys find their space, whether that's, some people may call that vision or what have you, but you just want to see how guys find space and how they create after they pass the line of scrimmage. If you're going to be a great running back in whether it's college or pro, you're going to have to be able to create at the second and third levels. And so you want to see how guys are able to string moves together, how they're able to avoid or deliver a blow. And you just want to see how they put it all together in one to make great music, like we like to call it. So some guys are able to find that space but not finish. Some guys are able to finish but not find space. Some guys are able to do it all in unison, which is why they tend to be the highly regarded backs in my eyes.
Let's go big picture for a minute. How important do you think the combine is? Because you were just there this weekend. How important is the combine in evaluating a player versus how important should be? So, like, for example, how do you think teams evaluate players at the combine versus how do you think the combine should be used?
Well, it's interesting because I learned a lot this week at the combine. I'm thinking, from a media standpoint, there should be nothing that changes your mind on what you see in a workout based off what you saw on film, because tape will tell the true story. So if a guy runs fast, well, he should have shown that speed on tape. And if he doesn't run fast but runs fast on tape, you want to wonder why, or somebody doesn't play fast but runs fast. So what's the issue there, right? But what I was able to learn from, let's say, a coaching or GM perspective, this is the coach's, a lot of times, first impression of a prospect with the workout, because they are, from what I was able to gather, was that the coaches tend to focus on recapping the season, look at their own free agents, then upcoming free agents. They grade potential free agents from other teams. Then they start their draft evaluation. So by the time they start the draft evaluation, it's at the combine. And so that's why you see some coaches go to bat for a guy that may have had a great workout before they go to the film, because they will allow that workout to taint their view while they're watching the film. So if a guy goes out there and runs a 4.2, they're going to watch the film now based off what they saw out there at the combine and kind of view it through a jaded lens. Like, okay, well, oh, wow, look how fast. See, this is how fast he is. I know he's going to be faster because we saw him run fast. Well, the scouts in reverse have seen this guy all year long and said, no, well, he's not going to play that fast at all. So don't believe what you saw out there in Indy. So that's why it's important for the GM, the scouts, and the coaching staff to be on the same page with the evaluation. It's different from from college, where, the head coach is essentially the GM and is involved in the recruiting process while the season is going on. So while he's preparing for, Ohio State, he's also watching film on the recruits that's going to come in and visit that weekend, and he has to respond to recruits and send emails and call guys on the phone, write letters. But he's abreast of what they're trying to bring into the program while also being on top of scouting the next opponent. So that's the difference between college and pro. So it's really important for these guys to get on the same page. So I think from how you approach it, whether it's media, GM, scout, coach, you all have a different approach to the combine. So for me, it's all about, by the time I'm there, I've seen these guys on film, so there's nothing that's going to surprise me, because the most important thing from my perspective would be the medicals and the interviews.
What was the one thing that either surprised you or stood out to you most about the combine?
Just how much it has grown. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when NFL Films put a special out about the combine. I want to say it was the 93 draft. So that was the Jerome Bettis, Drew Bledsoe year, and they gave the viewer a sneak peek at what went on in the combine, because we just didn't know about it, because it wasn't televised, and they were talking about some of the crazy questions GMs and scouts were asking them. They showed the workout. They showed, Drew Bledsoe working out. Jerome Bettis talked about they poked and prodded him and things like that. And it was just a peek inside of that part of the process that we didn't normally see, because for us at that time, it was just about, okay, guys play college football. There's, March Madness basketball, and then all of a sudden the draft comes up, right? But we saw what goes on in February in Indianapolis that we didn't know about. But now it's become an event to where there were so many fans there. There's a combine experience. The fans now get to watch these guys do the bench press. The amount of media coverage is there, because I believe at one point in time they didn't let the media come into the combine, but now it's become must-see TV, and the NFL has found a way to capitalize on 4 to 5 days of guys essentially just working out.
And that's really what it is. It is guys working out. It's guys doing athletic activities, and you mentioned for a lot of coaches, this is the first time they're seeing guys, and over the years, whether it's been the last few years or even before we could see the combine, I always had the perception that when a coach or a GM falls in love with a guy because of a bench or a 40-yard dash or whatever it may be, that always made me nervous, because of the fact that we've seen so many guys have great combines or great workouts, and they don't pan out in the league. And we've seen that more and more, that because of the social media age, more of these guys doing these things is getting online. Like every 40-yard dash was on Twitter, and every bench press seemed to get on Twitter, and every good, bad, ugly thing got online, whereas in the past, if you weren't paying attention, it didn't get online. So I feel like what the whole world now is falling for the same. It's almost like a drug, right? Like you see a guy run and do something, and you become enamored with it. So the whole world now is dipping into the same drug that caused people like the Raiders, for example, to draft the Jamarcus Russell all those years ago, first overall.
Yes, and it's no matter, or a better example would be the fact they let that 40 times talk them into drafting Darius Hayward-Bay, who was known as a guy that couldn't catch. Or the Jets taking Stephen Hill high because he ran a 4.2 and because he was 6'5", thinking that equated him being Randy Moss. When no, what made Randy Moss was the fact that he could catch. It didn't. It just so happens that he also was 6'5" and ran a 4.2. So you see it all the time. And no matter how many times you have a guy, i.e. like myself or yourself, saying like, hey, man, this is not really important. The combine is just really a workout. Nowadays, with the advent of everybody wants to be a genius or a guru, they're going to create formulas to make you believe that, yes, this is important because you can tell which player is going to be good. For instance, they'll see Barry Sanders do a great 3-cone drill, create a formula, and say, oh, yeah, because you look, this when you punch in these numbers, and you look at his number juxtaposed to this guy, then it's going to tell you that this guy he's going to have great success. Well, I already knew that Barry Sanders had great agility by watching him play. So I think that's the thing. Everybody wants to be the smartest guy in the room, and I respect that. It creates opportunities for people to create things and gets people to think and maybe focus more on the numbers. And that's how some people can understand the game. But from a player standpoint, this is just a workout. And because people have put so much emphasis and focus on those numbers, now you see you've created a whole cottage industry of guys training for the test, training to run the 40, training to jump high in the, do the 3-cone drills and things of that nature, because people put so much emphasis on it that they can't just go out there and actually just do drills and feel comfortable with how they do it. So now you have guys choose not to work out, choose not to throw, choose not to run, because if people didn't make the combine such a big deal, then everybody would have went out there and just participated. You saw guys do it back in the day until it became a big show, and oh wow, so and so, look at that throw he made, and everybody psychoanalyzes it from 45 different angles and sends out mass tweets talking about how he missed this throw in this drill versus air with this receiver he's unfamiliar with, in a setting where the guy is nervous because he's auditioning essentially in front of hundreds of scouts and coaches. Now that's what you've created, guys to either over prep for it, not choose to participate, or just go out there and just clam up under the pressure.
Absolutely. And I always felt like some of these guys, when they do these, whether it's the drills or the runs or the benches, in some ways it either confirms a belief you already had about a guy. Like, for example, Saquon Barkley looked absolutely amazing. Like, we all knew he was a special player. But then seeing him run the 40 and seeing him bench and seeing him do the vertical, it was just like, it's like, all right, now it's even more sinking in how special this guy is. Whereas some of these other guys, they may not run a fast 40, and then people are like, oh, well, wait a minute, I don't know. And to me, that's why the tape is king, because it's the old saying, Mike Singletary, the famous, I want winners, Well, Emory, I want football players. I don't want a track star. You mentioned Darius Hayward-Bay. I want football players, and to me, that's why so many times a guy like a Kareem Hunt can fall to the 3rd round, or a guy like a Tom Brady goes to the 6th round. Not because those guys can't play in the NFL, but because people get so enamored with these measurables that they forget about the immeasurables.
And I always say size is not a skill, and so you're going to see that constantly. And there used to be a time where guys, it really mattered if you could play football. But before people started focusing on the numbers and focusing on the measurables, and football has always sort of been that way at the pro level, but I feel like it's gotten worse to where we're not going to see the 5'9", 235-pound Mike linebacker no more like Stan Mills out of a Division III program. That person won't even get a shot in the NFL. We probably won't see, and I always use this as an example. Imagine if Barry Sanders or Thurman Thomas played in today's NFL. They would say these guys were scat back and 3rd down specialists. They couldn't handle a full load because they were only 205 and 5'9 and 5'8. So, we fight the battle already when people say, oh, you shouldn't take a running back in the top 5 or take a running back early in the draft. You can get one in round 6. Well, when you do these redrafts, all you see is running backs go in the 1st round. Like, Kareem Hunt, if they did a redraft, would be in the 1st round.
Yep.
Le'Veon Bell, 1st round. Kamara would be in the 1st round. So I don't get why people are, 1, anti-good football players, 2, have really become married to this myth that you can't take a back high because of the perceived value, when essentially, when you look at offensive linemen, they give you no return as far as like points or plays are concerned. Now, offensive linemen are important, but they've created a position where I forget when it started, but they made the left tackle a premier position, when that essentially does not help you win games. Because if your quarterback is worth his salt, he's going to get out of the way of the pressure. When essentially guards in the guard are more important than your 2 tackles. But the perception was you needed a star left tackle in order to win. How has Joe Thomas helped the Browns in his tenure with Cleveland? So that's the thing. You put emphasis on points, sacks, interceptions, and everything else you fill in.
And to me, it's not about the position the guy plays. It's about how well he plays his position. And speaking specifically, you mentioned guys playing positions. Let's switch over to the quarterback. To me, one of the highlights of the Combine was Lamar Jackson's press conference, because people have compared him so many times to Michael Vick. I get it. I understand it. But I don't agree with it for this specific reason, Emory. I feel like Lamar Jackson is so much more mature right now than when Michael Vick was coming out of college. And I think that's the big differentiation. A lot of guys have talent, but not a lot of guys are mentally ready to make that next step. And the way he carried himself in the presser, in every interview, on the field in drills, he looked and felt like a professional football player, not just some special athlete.
I think the biggest thing when you look at the Vic comparison is that people may not have seen or remember Vic in college at Virginia Tech and at Virginia Tech offense. I want to say he threw the ball maybe like 12 times a game.
Maybe, on a good day.
Exactly. And so there were run-based offense. What made people fall in love with Vic at Virginia Tech was the fact that he had a rocket arm, he had escapability, and oh, by the way, he ran a legit 4.2. No one had ever seen anyone that fast playing that position, and so much so that it led Virginia Tech to the championship game that season. And so much of an anomaly that he had to go number one, because you didn't know how you were going to utilize him as a quarterback, but you had to take him because no one was ever that fast at the position. It was an advantage. So it was a total projection. So when you look at Lamar Jackson, same speed, same level of elusiveness, not as reckless of a runner, so that's a plus, but also a way more developed passer than Vic was. So I don't see why he wouldn't be the clear-cut number one quarterback or the no-brainer number one pick for a team that needs a quarterback, and he played in a pro-style offense. You saw him talk about that in that presser. They run the same offense at Louisville that the Patriots run. So, that people get enamored by, or people got suckered in by watching him rush for 1,500 yards. That's just icing on the cake. But if you take all of those yards and all those touchdowns away and look at his passing numbers, they're still ridiculous. So I think that's the key. Someone's going to get themselves a legit star in the NFL.
I saw one of a plethora of mock drafts so far a couple of days. I think it was yesterday, the day before, or maybe it was today, I forget. But I lose track of these days and all these mocks. But one guy had Lamar Jackson going to the Saints, and I'm thinking, do we really live in a world where a guy who 10, 15 years ago would have been a starting quarterback day one is now going to be mentored by a future Hall of Famer? I mean, it's just bizarre to think about how the evaluation with the quarterback position. I mean, Aaron Rodgers dropped to the 20s. You see guys, I mentioned DeMarcus Russell, but to me, the quarterback position is the most scrutinized and evaluated position in all of sports, and yet these teams still can't get it right because of the most bizarre reasons.
Yeah, it is. You know what? It's because, you're starting to see people do this with the tackle position. You de-emphasize it. If you don't put too much emphasis on it, you won't find yourself reaching for bad players or over-reaching for players that you can get later or what have you, or where that value lies. So if you de-emphasize the quarterback position and make the rest of your team better, then you'll be able to have success. Case in point, the Jacksonville Jaguars. You find yourself with 3 stud receivers, a stud tight end, stud left tackle, a stud running back, stud defenders across the board at each and every level. Blake Bortles couldn't do no wrong. They won in spite of him. And if you fast forward to the Rams, taking Jared Goff number one overall, which was questionable coming out of Cal and how he played. I know people were enamored. I know he threw 9 touchdowns against Grambling, but he wasn't the clear-cut number one overall prospect coming out in that class. But what they did this year to have success is they put stud talent all around him. So he really had no bad decision with the football, and it worked out for him. So I think if when you de-emphasize the position and make your team better, because remember it is a team game at its core, you're going to be fine. You're going to win more games than you lose because your team is better than the other team. And if you put too much emphasis on one position and make that the cornerstone of your offensive or of your team, you're going to struggle. And I think that's what happens with the quarterback position. People say you need a franchise quarterback to win. No, not really. You just need a guy to not make mistakes in critical situations, third down, backed up offense, inside the red zone, 4-minute offense. If you can play well there, it doesn't matter if you have a strong arm or a weak arm. That's why Tim Tebow won a lot of games in college and had success during that short stint with the Denver Broncos. We knew he didn't have the best mechanics, the best accuracy, but he played well in the situations when it counted, and that's why they won games and ultimately won the playoff game. So if you can de-emphasize the position and emphasize team, you're going to be way ahead of the curve.
And we forget there were 3 quarterbacks who were in the championship games, AFC and NFC this year, who I think I'm pretty safe saying they're not going to the Hall of Fame. Only one of them is. So, no offense to Nick Foles. I know he's Super Bowl MVP, and Case Keenum and Blake Bortles. We don't know what Blake's going to be, but there's only one Tom Brady, and the other 3 guys weren't him. So,
but look at Nick Foles. Great example in the playoffs. The last 2 games, the championship game, and in some parts of that Falcons game. So look how well he played in the situation. They asked him in that Super Bowl to make a few throws, maybe 5 key throws he had to make, and he made all 5. So would you confuse Nick Foles of being Aaron Rodgers? Would you take Nick Foles in the first round? No, but can you win with Nick Foles? Absolutely you can.
Talk with Emory Hunt. You can follow him on Twitter at FBall Gameplan. Also check out his YouTube channel for all the great content he has on there. Emory, I want to throw names out at you, and I want you to just give either an instant reaction or an instant analysis on each one. I'm going to give you some of my personal favorite guys in this draft. You ready?
Yep.
Quentin Nelson.
I think he's a really good guard. I have questions about his athleticism. To me, he's a lot like, I want to say he's a lot like Richie Incognito, you know?
All right, let's go with Sony Michel.
He reminds me so much of a guy that, like Clinton Portis, just a smooth runner, strong, maybe not the blazer, but has enough speed to take the distance that can help you out in the return game, and also as a receiver as well.
One of my favorite stories, not just as on the field, but off the field, Shaq Griffin.
It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up, because he's another one of those guys that he's a defensive version of what you like to call a guy like that has that it factor, like a Tim Tebow, right? When the lights are on, when they need a play, he makes it, and he's that guy. He showed up big in the playoff game, the bowl game against Auburn, and throughout the season, he was making play after play. When UCF needed to stop, he was the guy to make the stop. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes, because I do think he's going to be successful wherever he ends up.
Josh Jackson, the cornerback from Iowa.
I was not as impressed with his speed, but I love his ball skills. And can you score? Can you take the ball away? Jackson can take the ball away. So I will find a way to mitigate his speed, and I will do that by putting him in a slot and allowing him to cover space, cover everywhere where he could read the ball, react, and pick it off.
DJ Moore, wide receiver from Maryland.
A lot of people look at him and say he's Steve Smith. I don't think he's as explosive as Steve Smith. I know he ran a fast 40, but doesn't play that fast. But he is strong. I think he's kind of like a Ty Montgomery type as far as a receiver is concerned. You can throw him a short pass. He's going to break tackles because he's strong. His release is clean. I think he's a good receiving prospect in his draft class.
Another wide receiver for you, Braxton Berrios.
I think people underrate him because they look at him, he gets the white receiver stereotype, so they automatically want to throw him in the slot. But watching him play, I do believe he can play inside as well as he can play outside as an X. I think his releases are clean. He has great acceleration into his stem and is able to track the ball well. So whether you want to utilize him inside or outside, someone's going to get them a smart football player, because he was up for the Campbell Award as well, which gives it a top student athlete. So I like him as a person and also like him as a player.
a guy that you and I both like, but I think a lot of people don't know about. Quentin Flowers, the quarterback from USF.
I love how he went there at the combine and worked out as a quarterback, threw the football. And I talked to him at the East-West Shrine game, and he told me, like, from his sophomore to his junior season, getting Sean King there as the quarterback's coach really helped progress him as a passer. And he has that same it factor that you like. You saw the American Athletic Association championship game between UCF and South Florida, and how they were going toe-to-toe, point for point. And he was making some throws, man, deep down the field throws. He's not afraid to work it deep down the field. Accuracy can be hot and cold, and that's why he's not talked about the same caliber as the other four in the mix. But he's a quarterback, in my opinion. I think he has a place in the league.
And now I'm going to put it on you. Give me a guy that, whether you saw him on tape, whether you saw him at the combine, wherever you saw him, that you say, I don't care where this guy is getting drafted, this guy is going to have an impact in the NFL.
Carlo Thomas, the safety out of Johnson C. Smith. When you talk about ball skills, you talk about a guy playing, the free safety position, 6'2", about 185, 180, 22 career interceptions, 9 brought back for touchdowns, 3 kickoff return touchdowns. I mean, the guy makes it difficult to make mistakes. Like, if you're a quarterback, you can't have an errant pass. You really got to be decisive, accurate, and anticipatory. Otherwise, Carlo Thomas is making you pay. And he was a guy that picked off a ton of passes the last 2 seasons for Johnson C. Smith. I'm surprised he's not getting talked about, but that's a guy you're going to hear. You're going to start to hear a lot of as the pro day circuit rolls around and when things start to heat up. He may not get drafted, but he will find himself into a camp and make an impact.
Follow him on Twitter at FFootball Gameplan. Emory Hunt. He gives you more of the meat and potatoes of football analysis, college and the NFL, not just the fluffy stuff that you see on SportsCenter. Emory, appreciate the time and joining me on the podcast this week, and you and I will catch up on my radio show when we get close to the draft.
Appreciate that, Josh, man. As always, thanks for having me on.
That's a wrap for this edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like. If you want to drop a comment, do so down below. Give us some feedback. I appreciate you tuning into the show each and every week. I'm Josh Hennig. Thanks again for Emory Hunt for coming on the show, and I'll catch you all next week right here on the Mutant Blitz podcast.